The strange thing about being the family disappointment is that eventually people stop asking who you are and start telling you who you are instead. My mother called me at 5:47 on a Saturday morning, and before I even answered, I already knew what she was going to say. "Please don't embarrass us today," she said, skipping hello entirely. I sat up in bed and looked at the dark outline of my bedroom window. "Good morning to you too, Mom." She sighed heavily. "I'm serious, Evelyn. Your sister's wedding is important. There are going to be judges, attorneys, important people there. Just keep a low profile." I smiled despite myself because she had no idea how absurd that sentence was. If you've ever been the child your family underestimated, then you probably know this feeling. The strange loneliness of realizing the people who have known you forever do not really know you at all. "I can handle one wedding," I said. "Good," she replied quickly. "And maybe wear something simple." Then she hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. I was 33 years old. I had my own house, my own career, my own life. Yet somehow, one 5-minute conversation could still make me feel like I was 16 again, standing awkwardly in a corner while everyone else mattered more. My older sister Claire had always been the center of gravity in our family. Claire was beautiful, outgoing, effortlessly charming. Teachers adored her. Neighbors talked about her. My parents built entire conversations around her achievements. I wasn't jealous of her. At least, I told myself I wasn't. But there is a particular kind of ache that comes from growing up as someone's afterthought. I looked at the wedding invitations sitting on my nightstand and almost decided not to go. Then my phone buzzed again. It was a text from my mother, and "Please let me do the introductions." The message sat on my screen for almost a minute. "Please let me do the introductions." I read it twice and then set my phone down very carefully, the way you set down something fragile because you are afraid of what might happen if you hold it too tightly. The truth was, my mother had been introducing me to people my entire life. She introduced me as the quiet daughter, the serious one, the one who never quite fit in. She introduced me as if I were a side note in our family story. By noon, I was standing in front of my closet. I pulled out a simple navy dress and laughed softly to myself. It was almost exactly what my mother would have chosen for me. Not too bright, not too memorable. The drive to the church took 40 minutes. As I turned into the parking lot, I could already see rows of expensive cars and guests stepping out in designer suits and dresses. My sister's wedding looked less like a family celebration and more like an event people wanted to be seen attending. I had barely closed my car door when my mother appeared. She was wearing pale blue and looked immaculate. Her eyes moved over me from head to toe. "Perfect," she said. "You look nice." Then she lowered her voice. "A few important people have arrived early. Just stay close to me, stay close to me." I almost smiled again. I was 33 years old and somehow still being escorted through life like an unpredictable child. Inside the church, I recognized several faces immediately. A senior prosecutor, a partner from a large law firm. Then I noticed someone else. Near the front pew stood a man with silver hair speaking with the groom's father. I knew him instantly. He had been one of my mentors years ago. Before I could look away, he turned his head, and our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he smiled. It was a look of genuine surprise, the kind people wear when they find someone they respect in the last place they expected. He started toward me, and I instinctively took half a step back. Before he could reach me, my mother touched my arm. "Evelyn," she said quietly, "the bride's family wants to meet a few guests. Come with me." She had not noticed him yet. I glanced over her shoulder. The judge had stopped walking, probably because someone else had approached him. Relief washed through me so suddenly it almost felt like disappointment. My mother led me toward the side of the sanctuary where several guests were gathered around my sister and her fiancé. Claire looked radiant. She hugged me quickly, already distracted by someone calling her name. Then an older woman asked, "And who is this?" My mother smiled warmly. This is my younger daughter. She works for the county. The answer came so automatically that I almost laughed. Works for the county. As though I spent my days filing papers in a basement office, the woman nodded politely and immediately turned back to Claire. I stood there smiling, but inside something old and familiar settled into place. It was amazing how much pain could fit inside one small sentence. My mother had no idea she was doing it. Or maybe she did. I was never sure which possibility hurt more. Then I heard a voice behind me. Works for the county? The words were spoken gently, almost amused. I turned around slowly. The silver-haired judge was standing there. He looked at my mother first, then at me. There was recognition in his eyes, and something else I could not immediately identify. Then he smiled and said, "Mrs. Parker, I do not believe your daughter ever mentioned she was trying to keep her appointment with me today." The air around us seemed to change. My mother blinked twice. "Appointment?" she repeated. The judge looked pleasantly confused. "Yes. We are scheduled to meet after the ceremony." He turned toward me with an easy smile. "Unless something has changed." For a moment I could not find my voice. I had completely forgotten about the meeting. It had been arranged months earlier and then buried beneath hearings, paperwork, and a schedule that seemed determined to consume every free minute of my life. "No," I finally said. "Nothing has changed." My mother's hand tightened around the small purse she was carrying. I knew that look. It was the same expression she wore whenever reality refused to match the story she had already decided was true. "How do you know my daughter?" she asked carefully. The judge's smile faded slightly. He looked at me first, as if asking permission. I gave him nothing. "We have worked together for years," he said politely. There was a long silence. I could almost hear my mother trying to fit those words into the picture she carried of me. They did not belong anywhere. Claire stepped toward us then. "Mom, everyone is asking for pictures." But my mother did not move. She kept looking at me. "You never said you knew judges." The sentence was almost accusatory. I nearly laughed at that. I never said a lot of things because nobody had ever asked. Before I could answer, someone approached from behind the judge. It was the senior prosecutor I had recognized earlier. He stopped abruptly when he saw me. His face lit with surprise. "Judge Parker," he said warmly. "I had no idea you would be here." My mother's eyes widened. The prosecutor looked between us and smiled. "Oh, are these your parents?" Nobody answered him. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. My mother looked at me as though she had never seen my face before. The prosecutor's smile faltered. "I am sorry," he said gently. "I thought you knew." Claire was still standing beside us, holding her bouquet. I watched the color slowly drain from her face. "Judge Parker?" she repeated softly. "Nobody called me that here. In my family, I was Evelyn. Quiet Evelyn. Serious Evelyn. The daughter who lived somewhere else and sent birthday cards on time." I opened my mouth to answer, but my mother spoke first. "There has to be some misunderstanding." Her voice was calm, but I recognized something underneath it. Fear. The judge beside me frowned slightly. "No misunderstanding at all." Then he smiled at me again. "Your daughter was appointed to the bench almost 2 years ago." 2 years. The number seemed to hang in the air like smoke. My mother blinked several times. My father had finally joined us, and I could see confusion written all over his face. 2 years?" he said. I nodded once. Nobody said anything after that. The music from the sanctuary seemed strangely distant, like it belonged to another event entirely. Then my mother looked directly at me. "Why did you never tell us?" The question should have hurt. Instead, it exhausted me. I thought about every holiday dinner where nobody asked about my work, every phone call that lasted 3 minutes and revolved entirely around someone else's life. Every time I had started to explain something and watched their attention drift away, I tried, I said quietly. A long time ago, I stopped. My mother stared at me. Then, for the first time in my life, she looked genuinely lost. Before anyone could say another word, someone behind us called out loudly, "Judge Parker." The Chief Justice was asking whether Judge Parker had made it yet. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. The Chief Justice. Asking for me. Nobody around me moved. My mother looked as though she had forgotten how to breathe. My father opened his mouth and then closed it again. Claire still held her bouquet against her chest, but her fingers had tightened around the stems. I suddenly became aware of every small sound in the church. The soft music, the low hum of conversations, the clicking of someone's heels against the marble floor. It all seemed impossibly normal for a moment that no longer felt normal at all. The senior prosecutor smiled. "He has been talking about your sentencing reform initiative for months." I saw my mother blink again. Sentencing reform initiative. The words sounded foreign to her. They probably sounded foreign to me once, too. There had been a time when I came home from law school excited to talk about my classes. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table, explaining something I had learned that day while my mother nodded absent-mindedly and interrupted me halfway through to ask whether Claire wanted extra mashed potatoes with dinner. I had stopped talking about my work little by little. Not because I was angry. Eventually, it just seemed easier. "Evelyn." My mother's voice was barely above a whisper. "You know the Chief Justice?" I looked at her. There was something heartbreaking about the question. She was not asking because she wanted to understand my career. She was asking because she suddenly realized there was an entire world I belonged to that she had never even seen. Before I could answer, movement near the entrance caught everyone's attention. Conversations began to quiet. Heads turned toward the back of the church. Then I saw him. The Chief Justice had just walked through the doors, and the first thing he did was look directly across the room at me and smile. The room seemed to shift around me. I had seen Chief Justice Richard Lawson in courtrooms, at conferences, and during long meetings that stretched into the evening, but I had never seen him at my sister's wedding. He walked through the sanctuary with an easy confidence that drew attention without demanding it. Conversations faded. People stepped aside. Then he stopped directly in front of me. "Judge Parker," he said warmly, extending his hand. "I was hoping I would catch you before the ceremony started." I shook his hand automatically. "I did not know you were coming." He smiled. "The groom's father and I go back 30 years. Then his expression changed slightly as he looked around at the faces surrounding us. "And these must be your family." Nobody spoke. The silence had become so heavy it felt physical. Finally, I nodded. "My parents. And my sister Claire." He smiled at each of them. "You have every reason to be proud of your daughter." My mother blinked. "Proud?" she repeated softly. He looked surprised by the question. "Of course. Judge Parker is one of the brightest people on our bench. Last year alone, she has been doing remarkable work on several court initiatives. She works harder than almost anyone I know." He said it simply, as though these things were obvious facts. My mother's face crumpled slightly. I had never seen that expression before. My father looked at me with genuine disbelief. Claire's eyes filled with tears. "You did all that?" she whispered. I opened my mouth but could not answer. Suddenly, I was 10 years old again, bringing home a perfect report card while everyone rushed out the door to watch Claire's dance recital. I was 18, leaving for law school while my mother reminded me to call and ask how Claire's finals went. I was 29, receiving my appointment and staring at my phone for an hour before deciding there was no point in making the call. Then my mother looked directly at me and began to cry. The tears seemed to surprise my mother as much as they surprised everyone else. She quickly wiped at her face, almost embarrassed by them, but more kept coming. I stood there staring at her because in all my years growing up, I could count on one hand the number of times I had seen my mother cry. The Chief Justice quietly stepped away, sensing that he had accidentally walked into something deeply personal. Claire set her bouquet on a nearby chair and moved closer to me. "I did not know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I swear, Evelyn, I did not know any of this." I looked at her and believed her immediately. The strange thing was, I had never blamed Claire. She had simply grown up in a house where all the light naturally followed her. Children do not create gravity. They just live inside it. My father finally spoke. "You became a judge 2 years ago?" I nodded. He looked down at the floor. "That is extraordinary." It should have felt good hearing those words. Instead, it felt like someone complimenting a painting after walking past it every day for years without ever stopping to look at it. My mother reached for my hand, then seemed unsure whether she had the right to touch me. "Why did you stop telling us things?" she asked softly. I almost answered immediately, but then I realized something painful. I could not remember the exact moment I stopped. It had happened gradually, like daylight fading outside a window. One forgotten conversation, one interrupted story, one unanswered excitement at a time. Every time someone asked who I was, "You answered for me," I said quietly. My mother did not say anything. She simply looked at me. A few seconds passed. Her eyes filled again, as though she was replaying years of conversations in her mind. Then she took a slow breath and said, "I think we have been missing your entire life." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Claire stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. She was still holding back tears when she laughed softly and said, "I cannot believe my little sister is a judge." I laughed too, not because it was funny, but because there was something healing about hearing those words without disbelief or pity attached to them. My father looked at me carefully, almost as if he was trying to memorize my face. "I do not know how we missed so much," he said quietly. "Neither did I. Maybe families do not lose each other all at once. Maybe it happens slowly, in 1,000 ordinary moments. A missed question, an interrupted story, a habit of assuming you already know someone." The wedding coordinator called for everyone to take their seats, and the spell around us seemed to break. Guests started moving again. Music floated softly through the church. Life continued, even after something enormous had shifted. My mother looked at me one more time. "Would you sit with us?" she asked. It was such a small question, yet I realized she had not asked me to sit beside her in years. I smiled gently. "I would like that." During the dinner reception, my parents saved the seats beside them for me. At one point, my mother quietly slipped her hand into mine. Neither of us said anything. We simply watched Claire walk down the aisle, glowing beneath the stained glass windows. For the first time in a very long time, I did not feel invisible. When the ceremony ended, people came over to congratulate Claire and greet me. But what stayed with me was not being called Judge Parker. It was hearing my mother introduce me to someone and say with unmistakable pride, "This is my daughter, Evelyn." Sometimes I wonder how many people spend years waiting to be seen by their own families. And I still wonder whether anyone else has ever discovered that being recognized can feel both like a beginning and something you quietly grieve at the same time.